Welcome back to Digiburst, guys. Today I am joined by Aaron, who has recently topped the most recent Oceania regionals online. A decent amount of players and decent amount of rounds. Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself and give a shout out to anyone you like?
Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Aaron, or Shmaz1 as my tag. So yeah, it was a good time on the weekend. Lots of good players. The vibes were pretty good. So yeah, I had a really good time. And I think honestly, that's why I can honestly pull the win out. Is that yeah, I was just feeling good about it on the weekend. So managed to turn that into a win, which was really cool. Shout outs, I'll probably shout out my partner, my girlfriend. So we play a lot together. I think she ended up coming 28th, which is really cool.
Top 32.
So yeah, so we use each other a lot to practice Digimon against. Well, probably me more than her selling. Oi, I need to practice this change I've just made. She eye rolls and was like, okay, let's test it. So shout out to her, and just shout out to people in Newcastle playing Digimon. I feel like most of the winners have always been from, I don't know, Victoria or Sydney. So out here doing it for
don't
for
discount Queensland.
has Queensland, I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure Queensland's won some, but doing it for the rural people.
And you you do your own Twitch as well?
Yeah, true. So my Twitch is just Shmaz1. I used to stream like opening Pokemon packs and Digimon and stuff like that, just the opening, but I'm hoping to transition into some more gameplay stuff and just running people through some deck ideas and deck concepts. So if you want to check me out on Twitch, it's just Shmaz1.
Yeah, and you guys know he's a good player already. Alright, let's roll into the deck profile.
Yeah. Alright, so for those that don't know, I did go on to win with security control in a heavily dominated Digimon format.
Yeah, really surprising. A lot of people would say that security control is not in an advantageous position against Beelsmon.
See, that's where I disagree. that was my I was counting on that essentially. I knew that the first rounds could be a bit of a tenuous time, as I had to probably navigate, I guess, the whole of the meta.
Yeah.
But I knew if I could just win in the first couple of tables, that I would be paired against who I wanted to, which was Beelsmon essentially. And then as we go through the deck, I guess I'll explain my thought process as to why I could sort of get myself there.
All right, start us off.
All right, so the first card we have off the rack is the eggs. So we're running 4 Viximon.
Yeah.
A lot of lists I've seen people running is instead the Upamon, which I just never really understood, because that means you're just keeping your rookie in breeding until you get to the point where you're in struggle street, which is when you're at 3 or less security and you just need to push out and swing, hopefully to get one more. Whereas like with this, I was able to generate a lot more resources by usually pushing out a rookie, and then as I'm casting my options, drawing more cards, which is essential. Like you can't just be playing with like 3 cards in hand the whole game. Like you need options. So this was really important just to keep generating cards, so I had plays that I could make.
Yeah.
Speaking of the rookies, so it's pretty much just the 4 Salamon. This is pretty stock standard, pretty expected. Like I said, I wasn't always just using this for the recovery effect. It was obviously nice to have when it was, but sometimes I would just Evo, draw a card, next turn, push out, and just leave Salamon there as long as I possibly could, with the Viximon underneath, just generating resources. Sometimes you'd be surprised how long it could stay sometimes, which was really cool.
Yeah, because if you're at low security, people aren't pressured to remove it, because that's weak for them.
Yeah, and it even had some weird interactions. Like it really stopped a few like options, like because things that target the lowest level and stuff like that, Salamon would actually just like tank that for me and stuff like that. So
nice. There
really wasn't too much disadvantage to pushing it out. Obviously sometimes it would die, but usually I could draw another Salamon, I guess, by the time that I really needed Salamon for that recovery effect. Then moving into more of the Digimon, so the obvious choice is the 4 Magna. That's mandatory. I think. I don't think you can ever change that. You want to see this in your probably opening hand if possible, and as well as that, you kind of want to get it in the bin as quick as possible too. For Hellscythe, which I'll go into later, it's just Just a body, recovers 1 when you play it, which is obviously in security control. You want as much security as possible, and it gives you options to evolve into some of your other bigger boss monsters.
Yeah.
This is just a one-of, just my crack. It's good for clearing out a rookie that may be, I guess, stopping you or annoying you, but realistically, it's just I don't have Magna play. If you don't have Magna, but you need to get a level 5 in the bin, usually just playing this and then still using this to evolve into your boss monsters is the go. Sometimes it does extend your play a bit more if they have 9k and they hit into a Hell Scythe. You can play this out to kill it because you can discard to get the -3 as well. So just gives you that option. But I honestly didn't play this much over the weekend. It came up a couple of times.
There's another level 5 that turns opponents' Digimon into poop tokens.
Oh yeah.
I've seen that guy played in some second lists.
Yeah, I see the value of it. The only issue I have is that I guess with the way decks are playing, I think you need a minimum in your trash to get the effect off.
Yeah. And
I think from my testing, getting to that condition was really difficult. Like Secon doesn't really turbo through cards too quickly, so getting enough cards in the bin to get that effect is difficult. But obviously, if you get there, it's insane. Like, because anything dies then, because it's always a 6k poop. So
True.
I guess I was just going for consistency. 3 of Venusmon as a level 6. This was probably the MVP of the day, I would say. The amount of times that with the current meta of decks, it's really telegraphed what the plays are that they're trying to go for. So they'll do like a huge setup turn. And you can see that they're just waiting to push out next turn and do like a whole bunch, like pop off. So essentially you just wait for that turn and then you go boom, Venusmon, and then they can do literally nothing for that entire turn. And even sometimes in following turns, she still locks them down because a lot of their Digimon natively get security attack, or like their best version of their cards goes into a security attack version. So it really just shuts down their plays and it becomes quite difficult for them to deal with. So this was probably the best card I had for the format of the day. Yeah.
So did you specifically pick out security control because you thought the meta was very telegraphed?
Yeah. So you can really manipulate your opponents to doing what you want to do with security control. You give them heaps of memory when you want to, and no memory when you don't want them to have it. So by manipulating that, you could really, and like knowing that the decks kind of only have one play they can make at certain times, you could really, just force your opponent to, I guess, play how you would like. Which often meant like either they would dump their whole hand and then be left out of resources, or they would have to just pass turn because they couldn't afford to like spend all that memory on like their off turns and stuff like that. So it's all just really about manipulating your opponent.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal of security control, because it's so reactive.
Yeah,
you need to have the game knowledge in order to do it, and then respond well enough for it.
Yeah, because I think in the current meta, some decks are just too good at existing in that like 3 backwards and forward like memory struggle.
Yeah.
And so I guess you just don't want to let them sit there because they're so good at it, like cycling through cards and buffing memory for that like one turn that they have. So if you just go, okay, well, here, have 7 memory, do something with it, and then they sit there being like, oh, like I can't use all of this because they run out of their hand resource essentially, which is what they use to generate power. So
yeah,
just using that against them. Going into the last level 6, it's just an Oceania fall down mode. This one like wasn't as big. I'd generally rather go into Venusmon almost always. This was usually just if nothing was happening and I just use it for an extra recovery.
Yeah. So would you prefer the 4th Venusmon, or did you like the flexibility of like?
I like that it's purple.
The access of it.
Essentially, it's just here because it's purple.
Yeah, I think that alludes to something else coming up.
Yeah, that's the only reason. I probably would run for Venus. Totally valid. I don't think that would be a mistake to do. Here, this is gonna annoy a lot of people, I think, but this is for Death X's.
Yep.
He's a very good card. a lot of the meta really gives you options to play this, so you might as well. And I think this guy really comes into combo with the manipulation of memory. I think if you give your opponent that ginormous turn, you probably want to have Death X in hand to then punish it straight after. So that's why he's a really good boy. And again, another purple Digimon, so good for a future card.
Nice.
This is stock standard. I would expect all this to have this. Is just the 4 Holy Waves. Yep. Just more recovery. Again, it's a good card to play when there's not much happening on field. Just having 1 extra security, that could pretty much save you from losing. So throw that down whenever there's a turn to do so. The one of reinforcing memory boost, you'd run 4 if you could, but just the 1. And it's just a better version of Holy Wave, essentially. Recover a card. You don't really mind too much if your opponent knows exactly what one it is, because sometimes it just, the options you're putting back are so good, and then you can use it to gain memory, which can really extend your plays for a big turn.
Yep.
Another probably mandatory is a 4 of Hellscythe. This is just Magna 2.0, just a cheaper way to get your Magnas back and potentially clear stuff on board, which is why it's so important to get a Magna in the bin probably as early as you possibly can, because otherwise this card's just going to go to waste a lot if people are hitting it in security and only getting minus 6,000. Especially in current meta, there's a lot of, I guess, big swings, so while it's good to reduce their top end swing, so sometimes they'll hit this and then maybe hit into a Venusmon or something in security and die, like generally you want to be making sure that this hits Magna.
Yep.
Another favorite card of everyone is Degrade. The unavoidable security option, we call this one. You can do whatever you want to your stack, but this is going to put you in your security. So pretty unavoidable. Generally you want this in security. It's quite expensive to use from hand, but you will absolutely use it if you have to.
It doesn't have to be expensive though. You do have ways to cheat.
Yeah, and I guess we'll get to that later. But yeah, you can make it cheaper. And probably my favorite thing to do with this was to put cards that I knew my opponent would want later in their security, and then just leave it there forever. So especially against Beelzemon in a meta where they run a lot of 2-ofs. If you see a particular, you have to do a lot to keep track of what your opponent is milling, so it required a reasonably intimate understanding of their deck, but I know most of them only run 2. So you would watch out for cards and you would see what they're milling, and if they haven't milled the second version of like a specific card, you would Chaos Degrade it, put it in security, and then that's where it lives for the rest of its days. Yeah,
that's really clever, because if you can put back their Beelzemon X, then they won't have access to the trashing effect.
Yeah, exactly.
Until they see their second copy.
Yeah.
Like usually their way to do that is to recycle it with that Bravel's Barrage.
Yeah.
But they can't recycle it if it's in security.
Yeah,
that's super clever.
That's it's kind of like the banish zone, I guess. for now, it's banished now in their security. Never to be seen
face
again.
Down in security.
Yeah. So definitely a number of times I was counting cards and I could see that if I put this in their security, they're never going to see another copy again. Like they'd have like maybe 5 cards left, and I'm like, sure, if it's in the last 5, whatever. But like it's a 50-50 now at this point, like whether they're going to see it again. So I just put it face down and then stop swinging. I'd find sometimes in the matchups I would swing in, because I'm like, no, I've seen enough copies of all their cards. They can reasonably get what they need, so I'm just going to pressure them.
And if you can put their first copy into their security, you can push them into the later game where they would see their second copy. And in the later game, you've amassed enough resources where they can't do that strong push to end the game in that turn. Yeah. Because maybe you're tapping Karis and Mimis to force the turn pass.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Ideally.
And so, yeah, you're really just restricting their plays when you've got a deck that can essentially, select whatever they want to put it back, so you just put it where they can't access it.
Nice.
Similar story, this is just a weaker version, I guess, with Lonky. I don't really know how you say it, but I'm going to say Lonky. early on, it's just a neg 12,000, which is a good number. It kills Billsmon most of the time, unless they've got the DP buff. But even then, negative 12 to have them continue swinging can be pretty awkward. And then if it's in the later part of security, it just boom, put it on the stack, never to be seen again. I never had the perfect condition come up where you get where it's the 3 security and you get to do both. Would have been nice, but it was still reasonably good.
Yeah, he still got you to first place.
Yeah. One of Rivals Barrage. There's no real reason for this. It's just a cheaper deletion spell.
Yep.
Generally speaking, I want to kill the highest. And yeah, that's pretty much the only reason. You could probably run Fly Bullet as a different one, but I like the idea that I could kill a level 7 if I needed to, whereas Fly Bullet seemed a bit restrictive in that means. The one of Wyvern's Breath, similar reasoning to Rivals Barrage, except if they have, I guess, deep deletion protection, you can neg DP instead. So they're kind of just complementing each other, I guess. The 2 Schwartz, this was really just here for the Hunters matchup. I didn't play that at all, but I was just worried about getting board swarmed without having Death X or something in hand. It's also good against Beelzemon. They play out a lot of imps and they like to keep their guys at level 5 pretty often, so it's just good for clearing out. There wasn't too many times where I found that I only had this card and they only had a level 6. Like, I usually had this as an option for whenever I needed to play it, so 2 seemed appropriate. This is probably the best boy, the Calling from the Darkness. I didn't believe in this card until I put it in my deck, and then I'm like, okay, this card's so good. The amount of times that you could just reach back in and grab more Death X's was insane, especially when your opponent would set up a crazy Death X turn. You could honestly play a Death X, Calling from Darkness, kill your Death X, bring back more Death X's, play more, and just the on-play effect is so good, especially when they think they've played out of range of Death X, being a higher level. You just go, no, we'll just keep doing it until, I guess, all your dudes are at a point where they can be destroyed. So
yeah, they did for you twice.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So I did that a fair bit, and yeah, like I said before, it does grab Ophanimon if I want it. I did it once, I think, just because it was the only other card, so I'm like, oh, I might grab it back. All right, so here's where the tamers start. It's all really just about taxing your opponent or generating resources for yourself. So the resource generator is definitely with you casting so many options, you really just gotta reduce the cost of them essentially, and you want to play these early because the more options you cast, I guess they snowball the memory that you're getting from them. By the time if you can get 3 down, sometimes you get to the point, or 3 of these, and there's another Kari I'll get into later. You can keep turn when you cast some of your recovery options, which is really cool because you can extend your plays out. And then even on turns when you're not using to play something instead, it just taxes your opponent because they'll want to use an option, and they got to sit there and think, do I want to pay 3 memory to play this, 3 extra memory to play this option? The turn that people don't think about is that they'll grab their X antibody and they'll jam it under their Digimon so fast.
Oh yes. Yeah, and then you
just got to sit there because they do it so fast that you have to be paying attention. So they go wham, and then straight away you just got to go whack, and then you're like, okay, that's 3 memory. And then the amount of times they're just like, oh, whoops.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, yep. So got to be paying attention to that one, but that one does catch a lot of people. So Mimi is probably the best girl for as far as tamers go. Got 3 Karis. I reduced it by 1 just because I was less excited to see Kari than I was to see Mimi. And it's a little bit more expensive to play just to give you that purple source to start playing options from. And it doesn't really start generating the value straight away, at the start. 1's okay. Obviously, it's funny to have 4 down, and for the memes, like your opponent gets past to 3 with their tamer, they swing, and you're like, okay, pass turn. Like that's funny, but like very unlikely that you're getting all. So 3 just seemed appropriate for the chance of seeing it, and just your opponent's got to pay the tax if they want to swing. Then we got the 2 carries. 2 carries seemed alright because realistically, I only ever wanted down. Paying another one just seemed expensive, and you just use it for when you recover to gain a memory. So when you're being passed to 3 most turns, it was good because if you play a Magna, it passes your opponent to 6 because they probably got a memory tamer, so it's an efficient use of memory. Or again, with me in combination with Mimi, if you cast an option like Hell Scythe or Holy Flare, what's it called again? Holy Wave.
Yep.
You use Kari to keep it your turn, and then just play another card if you need to.
Nice. That's really good.
And the last one, which is probably the spiciest choice, which I don't see anyone do, is this card is really good for me on the day. It's a massive tax, and in a format where people are really wanting to push out level 3s, like Hunters and Digimon, they all want to push out their level 3 because they want to get all their on field. So they always leave their level 3 in breeding. And if you play this with correct timing, your opponents set up a level 3, then you play it. So they have the choice. They either have to pay the tax, or they evolve and then they delay their push out turn. So they have they're essentially paying the tax regardless of whether they push out or not. And then
this really shuts down Hunter. Yeah,
no, it does. And I'm pretty scared of Hunters because if they can just go so fast that I don't get to set up my board. So using this to slow them down is really good. And then the secondary effect of drawing when level 5 was really good. Again, draw can be a problem with this deck. Happened a number of times where I just drew like absolutely abysmal hands, and if you can just get a card like this down and you just start deleting stuff, no matter how poor like the value is, like you're just like, oh, level 4, yep, good enough, like throw down like wyverns just to kill it and then draw it a card. So like it's like neutral hand essentially. You draw a card for killing it, and it's just really what you want, so you can make sure you draw to the cards you need so you have options to play on turns. But yeah, Digimon Emperor is probably the second best card for me of the day.
This sort of counters the your hardest matchups, Cross, Hunters, maybe Red Hybrid if they hit you in the early game.
Yeah, exactly. And it came up a lot. Even just the fear of it, people are really greedy. They just don't want to pay it. No matter how much they probably could, they just don't want to give me the 2 memory from it. So I think maybe once I had someone just be like, oh yeah, okay, I'll push out still. Just the fact that they just see it and they're like, nah, I don't want to do that. So they'll just evolve, and like that just gives me another turn to like breathe a bit and set up a bit more because they chose not to push out.
Yeah. Nice.
And yeah, that's
All right, tell us about your matches. Your matchups.
Yeah, so my matchups were more or less what I was hoping to get. I think it was 4 Digimons.
Nice.
That matchup seemed just really easy. I know everyone I've talked to said, I don't understand, like how that seems bad. Like they just mill your security and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, but they just mill their deck. They just run out of steam. So essentially, by making them pay as much taxes as possible and just making my security stack as big as possible, they would generally run out of cards before they could get through it. So that was just how that matchup went.
Was it more like they decked out, or did they like run out of resources to make pushes?
A little bit of both. Some would deck out because they would go too hard in the first turn or 2. Which it's a blaze of glory sort of story. Like honestly, to beat Secon, you have to do that. So they're not necessarily doing the wrong thing. But if I can establish the board after they've done it and not be too behind, then the game just goes out of control for me, because now they've pretty much milled through half their deck, and if they do it again, they'll be done, finished. Or it was the other situation where I would put their key cards in their security and then just know that they couldn't push again with that, or like, yeah, their X is gone, or like Venusmon's on the field, and if they want to go into X again, they can't go into the starter deck Beelzemon because it gives security attack, so therefore they'd have to go above to go into the X, or they'd have to put X antibody underneath, and with all the Mimis on field, I would just make it like extremely difficult for them to do that. Or they want to push out the Impamon that has the warp ability, but then I'm like putting down Digimon Emperors just to make that like really bad for them. So just really trying to like restrict what they're trying to do. So that's how I found winning those was pretty easy. And then my other matchups were Marstimon, which was, we both laughed when we got into that match. We're like, damn, we're not supposed to be versing each other. But I win that matchup 9 out of 10 times just because we're essentially trying to do the same thing, except they're going to use more cards doing it. So my opponent was pretty good on that front. He acknowledged that he was just going to deck himself out first every time, and I was just going to win the resource war. So I think he saw the writing on the wall and conceded both matches as soon as they started to not go in his favor. And he could pretty much see what I was doing, which was not recovering more than I needed to, and not drawing to, just so I would essentially win in a deck out situation. Because in that matchup, neither player can really push for game. Like, it's very difficult. And then probably my hardest matchup of the day was Digimon.
Digimon, like Armor Rush? Ulforce, yes. Yeah, Ulforce, yeah.
Yeah, so that was probably my hardest matchup just because it goes pretty quick. It gets up there and starts swinging. So essentially, I'm sitting there with my fingers crossed, just hoping that in the early swings, they're hitting something huge like Chaos Degrade or Wyvern's Breath or something like that. Yeah,
they're super vulnerable to removal in the security.
Yeah, so I had no other choice but to just build my security up and just pray.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Aaron. I'll have your Twitch linked below so people can check you out. See a hugely experienced player in action. Anything else you'd like to end on?
I think I just wanted to show that it's not always just about grabbing like a list you've seen like North America, Europe play, like whatever's top there, and running it in Australia. I still think there's always room for counter meta and like really thinking about how you can win the game and crafting your own deck. And I wanted to show that, like I was the only security control player in the whole tournament. So so I mean, and people say like security control is such a reactionary brain dead deck, but really, I think you've demonstrated just how like thoughtful you've made this deck, and also your own. It was completely creative with your flexible spots. Yeah, no, exactly. And yeah, I found that's how I had to win. Like I had to understand how my opponent's decks run. Like it definitely is not brain dead. I would argue that Beelzemon, sorry, is much more brain dead because you're just playing your deck your way. Like there's a lot of complication. It's solitaire. It's complicated, don't get me wrong. Like you've got to do a lot of tricky things with your plays, but you don't so much care what your opponent's deck is doing. Whereas this one is, that's all you care about is what your opponent's deck's got to do. So you really got to sit there thinking about it. And yeah, I'm just an advocate for not necessarily just playing what the tier 1 deck is and just thinking what will work against certain decks. So yeah, just good to show that it paid off.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Aaron. I'll be definitely watching you closely coming up with the Ultimate Cups. Are you checking them out?
Yeah, I'll probably play in them. I have no idea what I'm going to play yet. But
yeah, not this one. All right. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining me, Aaron. Subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.
All right. Thanks so much. Catch up.
Catch up.